My sister didn't just try to ruin my business, she tried to erase me completely. And when lies, lawsuits, and sabotage didn't work, she showed up at my doorstep with one last move that nearly broke me. I never really had a family. I had people I was biologically related to, sure, but the kind of warmth and belonging that's supposed to come with family, that never existed for me. I was the oldest of three, me, then my younger sister Jenna, and finally our baby brother Kyle. Growing up, I learned quickly that I wasn't the one they cared about. If I'm being honest, it felt like they hated me from the start. My mom always said I was a difficult child, but that's just code for you didn't fit into our plans. I was quiet. I liked reading, sketching, taking things apart and putting them back together. I wasn't into sports like Kyle. I didn't play dress up with Jenna. I stayed in my room, out of the way, and apparently that made me the problem. If I cried, I was being dramatic. If Jenna cried, it was like someone declared a national emergency. Jenna, man, she was something else. From the time we were kids, she was manipulative in ways I couldn't even comprehend back then. She could turn on the tears in seconds flat. She'd break a vase, blame it on me, and I'd get grounded for a week. She once told a teacher I hit her, I didn't, ever, and when I denied it, my parents dragged me out of school and punished me anyway. They didn't ask for proof. They didn't ask for my side. They never did. By the time I was a teenager, I'd started to internalize it. Maybe I really was the problem. Maybe something was broken in me. I'd look at my reflection and wonder what I had done to make my own family look at me like I was a stain on their lives. Kyle followed Jenna's lead, he always did, and if she was cruel, he doubled down. The only difference was he'd do it openly, not behind my back. There were days he'd stand in the doorway of my room just to tell me that no one would care if I disappeared. I guess the turning point, the moment I knew I was entirely on my own, was my senior year of high school. I'd kept my head down, gotten decent grades, and had one teacher, Mr. Harland, who genuinely believed in me. He helped me apply to a couple of trade programs, electrical work, FAC, and even mechanical drafting. I got into one. Not college, exactly, but a solid trade school program in Ohio. I remember standing there in the kitchen with my acceptance letter, thinking for one brief second that maybe, just maybe, my parents would be proud. They weren't. My mom barely looked up from her phone. My dad just grunted. Jenna, of course, laughed and said, "Wow, congrats on being the first loser to brag about a vocational school." I felt like I'd been slapped. I was used to her attitude, but something about that day, it stung. Maybe because I'd allowed myself to hope. Still, I made plans. I started saving every cent I made from working at the local auto shop after school. I didn't party. I didn't date. I didn't have the luxury. I was getting out. And I knew I wouldn't be welcome back. That summer, I turned 18 and packed my bags. I wasn't even done loading up my car before my dad came out and tossed a garbage bag at me. "Take your crap. You're not leaving it here," he said. I asked if I could come back to visit over the holidays. My mom looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't bother." I didn't. Life after that was rough. I lived out of my car for a bit while I got settled in Ohio. Slept in parking lots. Took showers at the gym. It was humiliating, but it was mine. Every miserable moment was mine and mine alone. Trade school was intense but rewarding. I worked part-time and studied like my life depended on it, because it kind of did. I didn't hear from my family that entire first year. No calls. No messages. Not even a birthday text. Meanwhile, Jenna was all over social media posting selfies at some state university, surrounded by friends and supportive family. Every time I saw her smug little captions, "So grateful for my amazing family," I wanted to scream. They never posted about me. I might as well have died the day I left. But I didn't die. I got through school. I got certified. I landed a job at a mid-sized vac company with a decent salary and full benefits. I found a little one-bedroom apartment that smelled like paint and freedom. I started buying furniture off Craigslist, piece by piece. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And slowly, life started to get better. I picked up side gigs and saved like a maniac. Eventually, I made enough to start my own small business doing HVAC repair and installations. It was risky, but I poured everything into it. Branded the truck. Made a website. Passed out flyers. Word got around. I was good at what I did. Reliable. Respectful. Affordable. I built something. It took years. I missed weddings, funerals, birthdays. Not by accident, intentionally. I didn't want to go back, not even out of guilt. I knew who they were, and I knew who I was becoming. There was no overlap. Then, just as I was starting to breathe easily, Jenna reached out. It started with a DM on Facebook. Just a wave emoji. I ignored it. Then came the text. Hey stranger, long time. Can we talk? I stared at my phone for a solid 5 minutes. My first instinct was to block her. But curiosity got the better of me. Maybe I just wanted to see how deep the rabbit hole went. I replied, talk about what? She replied almost immediately. I've been thinking a lot lately. About everything. I want to make things right. I nearly dropped my phone laughing. Make things right? This was the girl who once told me she wished I'd never been born. Who smeared my name to everyone we knew. Who stood by while I was kicked out, homeless, and alone. And now, suddenly, she was interested in reconciliation? But against my better judgment, I said okay. We met at a diner halfway between our cities. I arrived first, as usual. She was late, as usual. When she walked in, she gave me a tight hug like we were long-lost siblings from some Hallmark movie. I just sat there, trying to keep my guard up. Wow, she said, sitting across from me, you look good. Healthy. I shrugged. Thanks. Business keeps me busy. Her eyes lit up at the word business. Oh right. You started that evac thing, didn't you? I nodded slowly. Yeah. It's been doing well. That's awesome. So proud of you. I could feel the gears turning in her head. Jenna never did anything without an angle. We chatted for a while. Surface-level stuff. She talked about her failed relationships, how Kyle was still a mama's boy, how our parents were trying to be better now. I didn't say much. I was waiting for the real reason she wanted to see me. It didn't take long. So, she began, stirring her coffee. I actually wanted to ask you something. It's kind of big. Here it comes. I've been struggling, like financially. And I heard you have a house now. I was wondering, could I stay with you? Just for a little while. Until I get back on my feet. I nearly spit out my drink. She said it so casually, like she wasn't asking me to invite the snake back into my garden. I don't think that's a good idea, I said flatly. Her face dropped. Why not? Because we're not close, Jenna. Because I don't trust you. And because the last time I was in a home with you, you made my life hell. She looked offended. Like I had just betrayed her. That was years ago, she said. We were kids. No. You were old enough to know what you were doing. She crossed her arms. So you're really going to say no? After everything I've been through? I laughed bitterly. You mean after everything I've been through? The conversation ended shortly after that. She stormed out, muttering something about how I'd changed. I paid for my own coffee and left. That was 6 months ago. A few weeks later, I started getting strange calls about my business. People claiming they'd heard I was running shady operations. That I was overcharging, faking repairs, even stealing from homes. None of it was true, of course. I run my business like my life depends on it, because it does. I keep records. Cameras. Paper trails. Everything clean. But the timing? Too perfect. Then I found out Jenna had been talking to some of my clients. Spreading rumors. Telling them I was mentally unstable and bad with money. She even tried to report me to the Better Business Bureau. It was clear what was happening. She wanted to ruin what I'd built. She couldn't take it directly, so she tried to burn it down. And that was when I knew. My sister didn't just want a place to stay. She wanted everything. After Jenna stormed out of that diner, I honestly thought that was the end of it. One last pitiful attempt to worm her way into my life, followed by a dramatic exit that matched the person she'd always been. But I underestimated her. That was my mistake. It started small. A client called me one evening, asking if I had raised my service prices. I hadn't. I gave him the same quote I always did for a basic install. He seemed uneasy but didn't push it. I chalked it up to miscommunication. A few days later, someone else cancelled last minute, saying they'd heard some things and weren't comfortable proceeding. That one hurt. It was a big job, a new construction home, and would have covered most of my bills that month. When I asked what they'd heard, they got cagey. Said something vague about reliability issues. I knew right away this wasn't random. So I started asking around. I called a couple clients I'd worked with in the past who I trusted. One of them, Miss Connie, an older woman I'd helped the previous summer, was blunt with me. Honey, your sister came by my church group. Told everyone you'd been stealing tools and cutting corners. I didn't believe her, but I figured you should know. I felt like someone had poured ice water down my back. Jenna was going out of her way to sabotage my name. I mean, who does that? Who tries to ruin their own brother's livelihood? Especially when all I'd done was say no. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what her end game was. Did she think I'd cave? That if she destroyed everything I worked for, I'd have no choice but to let her in? Or was it just about revenge for not handing over my house like some kind of golden ticket? I tried confronting her. I called her. No answer. Sent a couple texts, nothing aggressive, just asking what she thought she was doing. Left on read. Typical. I wasn't about to let her wreck my business. So I went into damage control mode. I posted a video on my business page, just me in my workshop, real casual. I thanked my clients for their continued support and briefly addressed the rumors. I didn't name her, but I said someone close to me was spreading false claims, and I had evidence to disprove everything. I even posted a few glowing reviews I'd gotten recently, just to show I was still out here doing solid work. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. Wow, you're really going to play the victim? I didn't need to guess. It was Jenna. I didn't reply. But I did start documenting everything. Every rumor. Every complaint. Every suspicious cancellation. I made sure I had time-stamped invoices, security camera backups, and customer feedback. I knew if this escalated, I'd need receipts. And escalate it did. I came home one evening to find a note taped to my front door. You don't deserve this life. Just that. No name. No handwriting I recognized. But it felt like her. Petty. Threatening, but vague enough to deny. I reported it to the cops. They said unless there was more, they couldn't do much. I asked them to at least file a report. Then 2 days later, I got an email from a former client I barely remembered, a guy I did some duct work for in the early days. He said he'd received an anonymous tip that I wasn't licensed. That I was operating illegally. He thought I should know, just in case. I am licensed. Fully. But sure enough, that tip had also been submitted to the state board. I had to go through a full audit. It took a month to clear my name. A month of sleepless nights, jumping through hoops, and praying that the chaos wouldn't bankrupt me. Thankfully, I had everything in order. They closed the case, and I was fine. But I was done playing defense. I needed to understand why she was doing this. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to my mother. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since I left home at 18. But I needed context, answers, anything. Maybe, for once, she'd be honest. She picked up on the third ring. Her voice hadn't changed, still clipped, like every word was an effort. What do you want? She asked. I need to talk to you about Jenna. A long pause. Then, what did she do now? So I told her. Not everything, but enough. The sabotage. The fake rumors. The tip to the board. She sighed. She's always been dramatic. That's not drama. That's deliberate. She's had a rough couple years. You know that. No, I don't know that. Because no one told me anything. Another long pause. Then she dropped the bombshell. She lost her job 6 months ago. Got caught embezzling. It didn't make the news, but it was bad. She moved back in with us after that. My mind reeled. Suddenly it made sense. She was desperate. She'd already tanked her own life, so why not try to leech off of mine? But that doesn't explain why she's going after me, I said. You embarrassed her, my mother said flatly. She came home thinking you'd take her in, prove her wrong about you. And when you didn't, she saw it as an attack. So her solution is to ruin me? She's always had a vindictive streak. You know that. The words hung in the air. She didn't sound apologetic. She didn't sound surprised. Just resigned. Like she'd accepted Jenna's behavior as inevitable, maybe even justified. She tried to destroy my business, I said. My livelihood. You know that, right? She says you blew it out of proportion. I almost laughed. Of course she does. I'm not taking sides. That was rich. My whole life had been her taking sides. And it was never mine. I don't need you to take sides, I said. I just need her to back off. Because next time she tries something, I will take it legal. My mother sighed again. I'll talk to her. I'm serious. So am I. We hung up. A few days passed. Things got quiet. Too quiet, honestly. No weird calls. No sabotage. I thought maybe the warning had worked. Then I got the letter. Certified mail. A legal notice. Jenna was suing me. According to the letter, she was claiming defamation, lost wages due to interference, and, get this, partial ownership of my business. Why? Because she claimed she helped me start it. She said she'd invested in the early days. That she gave me money when I was starting out, helped with branding, even contributed ideas. That without her, my company never would have existed. It was complete fiction. She never gave me a cent. Never helped. She didn't even talk to me during those years. But she knew one thing, dragging me through court would cost me. Even if she didn't win. And suddenly, I realized something horrible. This wasn't about a house. It wasn't about revenge. It was about control. She couldn't stand that I'd made something out of nothing. That I'd survived being discarded by our family. That I'd built a life they couldn't take credit for. So now she wanted to take it by force. And I knew in that moment. This was war. When I first read the lawsuit Jenna filed against me, I didn't even get angry. I just sat there at my kitchen table, the letter in one hand, my untouched coffee in the other, completely numb. It felt surreal. Like a parody of my life. Like if someone had told me years ago that one day my sister would try to sue me for a business she never lifted a finger to build, I'd have laughed them out of the room. But there it was. Paper in hand. A demand for money. Recognition. Control. The claim itself was laughable, fabricated emails and screenshots printed out in a Word doc and attached as evidence. I don't know what was worse, the poorly edited email headers or the fact that she thought this was even remotely going to stand in court. She claimed she'd loaned me $5,000 in the early days, and that I agreed to give her a 25% share of the business in exchange. Not only was that a lie, but back when she says this supposed loan happened, I didn't even have a business account. I was still crawling under buildings for $15 an hour and living in a studio apartment with water damage and a flickering ceiling light. What really stung, though, wasn't the lie itself, it was the reminder that she didn't care if she destroyed me in the process. That's what this was about. Power. And when she couldn't guilt me into giving her what she wanted, she decided to try and break me legally. I got myself a lawyer. His name was Adam, young, sharp, and way too enthusiastic about this whole thing. He had the kind of energy that made you feel like you were being handled by a caffeinated hawk. When I showed him the evidence Jenna submitted, he actually laughed. "Is this it?" he asked, flipping through the flimsy packet. "This looks like something a middle schooler would put together the night before a book report." "Glad to hear that," I muttered. He tapped his pen against the desk. "She's not going to win. But she can make this painful. We'll file a motion to dismiss, but in the meantime, get your documentation together. Everything from the day you started this business. I already had most of it. I handed over years of tax returns, invoices, receipts, bank records, everything. I kept immaculate records, something that came from years of needing to prove my worth to people who were always waiting to call me a fraud. Jenna hadn't just picked the wrong target, she picked the most prepared one. Still, the stress hit me like a freight train. I stopped sleeping. Started grinding my teeth at night. Lost weight. My business suffered. I was constantly fielding calls, sending documents, checking to make sure no one else had been pulled into her orbit. I lived in a state of constant high alert, and I hated it. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then, "Are you happy now?" "Jenna." "What are you talking about?" I said, already recording the call on my second phone. "You've turned everyone against me. Mom won't even speak to me. Kyle blocked me. Dad said he's embarrassed to be related to me. Maybe you should have thought of that before filing a bogus lawsuit." Her voice got shrill. "You forced me to. You abandoned your family, acted like you were better than us, then flaunted your success like some kind of. I worked for what I have," I snapped. "I didn't cheat or lie or manipulate. That's the difference between you and me." "You owe me," she shouted. "You think just because you suffered a little in high school you're some kind of hero? We all had it rough." I didn't even reply. I ended the call. A few days later, Adam told me something that stopped me cold. Jenna's lawsuit was being withdrawn. "She backed out?" I asked, stunned. "She didn't have a choice. We countered with a motion for sanctions for a frivolous lawsuit, and once she realized it might cost her money, she bailed." I should have felt relief. But I didn't. Because I knew Jenna. And Jenna didn't quit. Not really. It wasn't long before the next hit came. A local journalist emailed me out of nowhere. Said he was working on a story about small business fraud. Asked if I'd be willing to answer a few questions. The language was vague, but the implication was clear. Someone had tipped him off with accusations, probably the same ones Jenna had tried to use in court. I didn't respond. But Adam did. Sent a cease and desist within the hour. The journalist backed off quickly after that, probably realizing he was being played. I thought I'd be done then. That finally, the storm had passed. But I was wrong. The real blow came when I got a call from my bank. There had been an attempt to access my business account. Someone tried to reset the password using security questions. I froze. The questions were personal. Favorite childhood pet? Street you grew up on? Questions only a family member would know. I had to change everything. Passwords. Emails. Bank account numbers. I even installed a new security system at my house, motion sensors, smart locks, camera doorbell. I felt paranoid, but not without reason. And then, finally, I got the confirmation. A friend of mine, someone who still lived near my parents, texted me late one night with a photo. It was Jenna. In front of a bar, drunk, shouting at someone. The caption, she said she should have burned his house down instead. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just trying to take what I built. She wanted to erase it. Erase me. And I wish I could say the story ended there. But what she did next, that almost broke me completely. I didn't sleep that night. After I got that photo, Jenna standing outside that bar, slurring that she should have burned my house down, I sat on my couch in the dark for hours, just thinking. I wasn't scared exactly. I was drained. There was a time when that would have shaken me to the core. But after everything she'd already done, lies, sabotage, fake lawsuits, hacking attempts, I wasn't shocked. Just numb. Still, I called the cops in the morning. Not to file a report, because technically she hadn't done anything actionable. But I wanted it logged. I told them everything about the fake lawsuit, the threats, the attempt to access my bank account, and now this drunk outburst. They jotted it down and said, if anything happens, call us immediately. That's the thing though, what happens when something does happen, and they still don't show up in time? So I took extra precautions. Had a reinforced deadbolt installed. Upgraded my cameras to a 24-hour monitored service. Got motion lights on every side of the house. And I told my crew at work that if anything weird happened, someone asking too many questions about me, someone showing up unannounced, they needed to call me first and say the schedule changed. That was the code phrase. I didn't tell them all the details. Just enough for them to know there was a situation. But I guess I knew deep down Jenna wouldn't come at me directly. She didn't operate that way. She always preferred puppeteering, twisting people around her until they did her dirty work for her. So when I got the call from CPS, it took a second to process. Child Protective Services. Hi, this is Amanda with CPS. We received an anonymous report regarding potential child neglect at your residence. I nearly dropped my phone. I don't have kids, I said. Amanda paused. You don't? No. I'm single. I live alone. I run a small business. Who told you I had kids? The report didn't specify names, but it listed this address and said you had 2 children under the age of 10 living in unsanitary conditions and being left unattended. That was Jenna. It had to be. I let out a bitter laugh. Well, I hope you like dogs, because the only other living thing in this house is my German Shepherd. Amanda was surprisingly understanding. She still had to come by a part of protocol, but once she walked through my place, saw the clean floors, the neat kitchen, and my dog Thor happily wagging his tail, she smiled and said, "This happens more than you'd think." Family disputes. That made me stop. I looked at her and asked, "Do people actually use you as a weapon?" "All the time," she said. She handed me a card, said if anything escalated to call her directly, and left. I stood there in my living room for a full 5 minutes, just staring at the card in my hand. That was when I knew this wasn't going to stop. Not with reason. Not with silence. Not even with lawyers. Jenna wanted me broken. Not just out of the house or out of business. She wanted me to disappear. To be ruined so completely that she could say, "See? He was nothing without us." I sat down at night and made a list, something I do when I feel overwhelmed. On one side I wrote, everything she's done. On the other, everything I still have. The first list was long. Sabotaged clients. Fake lawsuits. CPS reports. Identity fraud attempts. Smear campaigns. But the second list? That one mattered more. I still had my business. My clients. My house. My health. My freedom. And I wasn't going to give any of that up without a fight. That's when I got the idea. Not revenge, exactly. Just exposure. If Jenna wanted to play games in the dark, I'd flip on the lights. I started compiling everything. Emails. Text messages. Screenshots of her fake evidence. The recording from her phone call where she said I turned everyone against her. The photo of her threatening to burn my house down. The CPS visit report. Even a copy of the lawsuit withdrawal showing her admitting she had no grounds. I put it all in a folder. And then I sent that folder, digitally, securely, to every family member I could think of. Aunts. Uncles. Cousins. Even Kyle. I didn't add commentary. I just said, since Jenna seems to want attention, here's a full record of the attention she's earned. Then I logged off. No social media. No calls. I went completely dark for 48 hours. And when I turned my phone back on, all hell had broken loose. Texts. Missed calls. Voicemails. My cousin Lena, WTF, is all of this real? Uncle Darren, she did what to your bank account? Are you serious? Even Kyle, who I hadn't heard from in years, texted me, dude. I don't even know what to say. I'm sorry. I didn't reply to any of them. Because one text, one call, did stand out. It was from Jenna. Just 3 words, you ruined me. And I stared at those words for a long time. Because they weren't true. She ruined herself. All I did was tell the truth. But I guess for people like her, the truth is the ultimate weapon. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. Because what Jenna did next? She tried to go after the one person left in my life who still believed in her. And when she went after him, she made a mistake she couldn't come back from. I hadn't spoken to Kyle, our younger brother, in nearly 5 years. After I left home, he mostly followed Jenna's lead, parroting her words, joining in her mockery, and ignoring me like I'd been cut from the family tree. We weren't just distant. We were estranged. So when he texted me after I sent out that digital folder, it took me a while to respond. Not because I didn't want to. I just didn't know what to expect. His message was short, dude. I don't even know what to say. I'm sorry. I let it sit for a day before I replied. You don't have to say anything. I just needed people to see the truth. To my surprise, he wrote back quickly. I honestly didn't know half of that. She always said you cut us off because you thought you were better than us. I didn't realize how far she went. That hit me harder than I thought it would. Not because I needed his validation, but because I realized just how much Jenna had manipulated everyone. Even Kyle, who had been in the same house, breathing the same air. He bought into her story for years. We talked a little more after that. Tentatively. Carefully. Like 2 people trying to build a bridge out of matchsticks. He asked if we could meet. I said maybe. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. Which, I guess, made me vulnerable. Because less than a week later, I got a call from Adam, my lawyer. Hey, he said, you might want to brace yourself. Okay, what now? Jenna filed a new police report. She's accusing you of harassment, defamation, and now, coercion. I blinked. Coercion? She's claiming you blackmailed Kyle into speaking against her. What? I stood up from my desk, my heart pounding. That's not even remotely true. I barely spoke to him. I know, Adam said. I saw the texts. You didn't pressure him. You didn't even mention her. But she's spinning it like you forced him to turn on her. I rubbed my face. This woman's gonna drive herself into a padded room. She might. But in the meantime, you're going to need to be proactive. Let's get ahead of this. If Kyle's willing to give a statement that you didn't coerce him, that'll help shut this down fast. So I called Kyle. He answered on the second ring. Hey, I said. Sorry to drag you into this. It's not your fault, he said, voice firm. She came to the house screaming. Said I betrayed her. Told me I was dead to her. I didn't even raise my voice. I just shut the door in her face. Is that when she filed the report? I guess so. She left, then started blowing up my phone with threats. When I blocked her, she messaged Mom and said I was conspiring with you to ruin her life. Like we're part of some conspiracy. Would you be willing to give a statement? I asked. Yeah, he said without hesitation. Anything to make this stop. He met with Adam 2 days later and signed an affidavit confirming everything, no coercion, no blackmail, no pressure. Just two brothers who had a civil conversation after 5 years of silence. That should have been the final nail in the coffin. But Jenna wasn't done. Because her final move was pure desperation. She showed up at my house. It was a Wednesday evening. Late spring. I'd just finished a service call and was pulling into my driveway when I saw her, sitting on the steps of my porch like she belonged there. Hair tied up in a messy bun. Makeup smudged. Phone in hand. I froze for a second. She didn't look up. Just kept staring at her phone. I parked, got out, and kept my distance. You shouldn't be here, I said calmly. She stood, slowly. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between exhausted and hollow. I came to talk, she said. No, I said. You came to provoke. To play the victim one last time. You're not welcome here. She took a step closer. I just wanted to understand why you hate me so much. I laughed, short and humorless. You tried to destroy me. That's not misunderstanding. That's intent. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Yes, you did, I said sharply. Every step of the way. You wanted me to lose everything. Because you couldn't stand that I built something without you. Without them. Her face twitched. Like a mast slipping. I was your sister, she hissed. You were never my sister, I said. You were a bully in the body of a sibling. You tormented me for years, and when I finally found peace, you tried to take it. She flinched, but I didn't stop. You told people I was unstable. You filed fake reports. You tried to ruin my business. You sued me over things you made up. And when none of that worked, you tried to drag Kyle down with you. You stood outside a bar and said you wished I was dead. I don't hate you, Jenna. I pity you. Her lips curled. You always thought you were better than me. No, I said, I just wanted to be left alone. She took another step forward, and I instinctively reached for my phone. She noticed, scoffed, and threw her hands up. Fine, she snapped. Live your sad little life. Alone. Miserable. Bitter. I'm not the one who has to lie to people just to feel powerful, I said. Get off my property. And if you ever come back, the next people you talk to will be the police. For a moment, she looked like she might say something else. But then her shoulders slumped, and she turned and walked down the steps. Got into her car. Drove off. And that was the last time I ever saw her. It's been almost a year since that night. Kyle and I aren't best friends or anything, but we talk now. Check in every few weeks. Sometimes grab lunch. It's still awkward. But it's better. My business bounced back. Word got around. Clients who cancelled before apologized. Referrals picked up again. I hired 2 more techs. Got a new truck. Even started mentoring a few kids at the local trade school. And as for Jenna? She moved out of state. Tried to restart somewhere else. I don't keep tabs on her. I don't care to. But sometimes I think about those words from the text she sent me, you ruined me. And I realize now, that wasn't anger. That was confession. Because in the end, all she ever wanted was control. And when she couldn't take mine, she lost hers. For the first time in my life, I feel free. Not just from her, but from them. The house I live in is mine. The business I run is mine. The peace I fought for? That's mine too. And I won't give it up. Not for anyone. Especially not for family who never treated me like one.